Excellent. All right, so I'm gonna quickly run through some slides, kind of. These were kind of thrown in. Funny enough, I am here representing Continue, and today's my first day at the job. So, yeah, right? That's great. So, my name is Brian Douglas. I go by B Dougie. I'm B Dougie on GitHub. I actually used to work at this company, like upstairs and downstairs. I didn't have a desk. Worked here for almost 5 years. Anthony, who's delivering the pizza back there, hung out with all those guys all the time. So, can ask questions about GitHub later, but I'm here to talk about Continue. Who uses AI coding assistants to generate code? Your boss is not here, so you can put your hand up really high all the time. What is it, like 80% of your code generated with AI at this point? Yeah, cool. So I want to talk about writing rules. AI generated code can sometimes be, it needs some strict rules. Sometimes it could be loose rules. I wrote the tweet on Friday because I kept seeing a bunch of folks that I sort of looked up to in the coding industry, our industry, talk about how AI is kind of ruining all the good things and the bad things. But this actually came from a blog post on the left called Copilot Delusion. It's an okay blog post, but I thought that quote was really cool. I thought it kind of really spoke to me because I wanted to really think about maybe we're just using it wrong. You guys remember like Steve Jobs, you're holding it wrong with the iPhone. And then the right post is actually from Steve Klabnik, who's like famous for Rust and Ruby and Rails. That was like my coming up age of, I used to read Steve's blog posts all the time. But what I'm getting at is like, I've got a journey. I kind of mentioned I used to work at GitHub. I actually started writing code professionally about 12 years ago. I was getting my MBA, got a finance degree, was doing sales, then learned how to code, moved out here for a job. And my first language was actually Ruby. And funny enough, this guy is part of the reason why I wrote Ruby code, and I ended up getting up to GitHub. You guys know this guy? Uncle Bob. He's been on X, the Twitter, formerly known as Twitter. He does like these daily rants in his robe for some reason. I didn't even know what this was. I don't watch videos on X anymore because they're like X rated, including this one. But actually, he has a lot of like strong thoughts around programming and clean code. He wrote a book about clean code. And it got me thinking, like, what if we could write code with agents, but keep them in a way that could have structure and write code that's predictively going to be good? So back when I first learned how to code about 12 years ago, I learned Ruby. And then the next week, I went to this code retreat. I'm from Tampa, Florida. So Uncle Bob actually had 8th Light, was the place he worked at, the consultancy. Had an office in Tampa and Chicago, and I just had the luck out that I lived there. And they would teach you how to build this little program called the Game of Life. Anybody built Game of Life, Conway's Game of Life? It's a cool little program, writing different languages. And this is literally how I learned Ruby that weekend, was just like build that thing. So I kind of just wanted to spend the rest of the time talking through a demo in my VS Code. Sorry, that's Ghosty. So this is my VS Code. And then I want to talk about this concept that I heard Nate talk about last week called spec-driven development. It's the idea of having, like, you can do a cool little prompt, and I'm going to open up the little side chat. So this is Continue, and I'm going to just let's use a llama, because I want this not to work. So I'm going to use a small parameter and say implement the game of life based on the spec. So the game of life, basically, you've got all these squares, and if like two alive squares are next to each other, it kills the one that you're looking at. And then like if there's 3, then like anyway, I'll show you what it looks basically what I just showed you. It just has like a nice little command line interface. So I'm just gonna basically try to vibe this thing, but I'm actually gonna chat with it first. So we got this option here, option to either edit the code or chat with it, but I wanna implement the game of life using the spec MD, so probably something you're familiar. You can use some context, make the agent, or sorry, the coding assistant aware of what you're asking. And I'm just gonna not even try hard. I'm just gonna go ahead and just do that and see what happens. And the cool thing about this is I'm using Llama Local, using Ollama. It's built into my machine. I've already installed it locally. Raise your hand. You guys using code assistants, but are anyone using Ollama for your coding assistant or tried it once? Got to try it once. All right, there we go. So it's going to implement basically the game of life in Ruby code. So pretty straightforward. I've already written out the spec. It's going to be directly from the PDF you get from the website, and it's going to eventually, and because it's my local machine, it's an M4 Pro, not a Max, 16 gigabytes. It's going to take some time. But I will go ahead and trust that this is going to be working soon. Let me go back to my demo. So I guess what I wanted to talk about, spec-driven development and also test-driven development, is you can really just write some guardrails up front to make sure that your agent is going to get the stuff that you want it to do. And I think what I'm getting at with Uncle Bob is like there are best practices that exist in coding. And I think if anybody's been coding for longer than 5 years before the AI revolution, we used to do this. And then in the last 6 months, we stopped because we could vibe it. Well, I stopped because I could vibe code it. So I don't speak for myself. So I've got my spec, but I've also want to write test. And testing is actually something I started testing legitimately, no pun intended. 2 months ago, I thought, oh, if I could get agent, can I get the agent to write tests first? So the thing I'm going to talk through, so like it did implement this. If I wanted to go ahead and create the file, I won't, but I only have 15 minutes. So I'm going to just forget that even happened. And I'm going to switch to a faster model. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add git stash apply. And the one thing I was going to show is I do have rules. So I did have one rule, which is basically write clean and readable Ruby code. I don't have time to go break down Ruby code and teach you all the ins and outs on the Ruby methodology. But I did have a bunch of other rules that I wanted to apply. And the cool thing about this is these rules are taken directly from places I learned how to code from. So if I go to, that's me. If I go to these two books, so I read these books like pretty much back to front, cover to cover. I've read similar books in Go, but clean Ruby, clean code, pragmatic programmer, like all this type of stuff is how you kind of learn the basics. And I think we have an opportunity to teach our agents the same stuff that we should be teaching. And I think when we think about foundational models, maybe we get this for free. But a lot of times you don't have access to like a full-on Claude for, like maybe you're using Gemma, maybe you have a local model for your work that you have to use because your boss said to. This gives you an opportunity to add rules and add not even rules for you, but rules you could share across teams as well. So I've got like write clean code, but also write tests using TDD. So what I wanted to actually test out real quick, I'm going to switch to agent mode, and I'm going to say implement the game. Oop, typing's hard. Okay, life using the spec RB in a I probably should have created this file to keep it more constrained, but let's see if it can create a game RB. Ideally, you'd probably have a longer prompt, keep more constrained, talk to like a junior programmer. But let's see what happens. And it's going to basically use all these rules to basically have constraints on things like lines, how long methods should be. If you've read any of these books, it's going to have all this context on how to write clean Ruby code. So that's going to go ahead and run, and I'm going to run through the rest of my slides real quick. So the one thing I wanted to point out is what I was actually really impressed at when I was talking to Continue about joining is Continue really exists for amplifying devs and not automating devs. So I know like Satya stood on stage at Build and was like, hey, remember pair programming? Peer programming. And I think actually, it sounds silly, but I think actually a really good way to think about it. I was actually at GitHub when Copilot launched, and it was all about copilots. It was about assisting. It was about having a junior programmer along for the ride. And I think what we can do is we can level up these junior programmers to eventually become senior and senior agents. And I think the one thing we should all be thinking about is like legitimately junior programmers, like what are we doing for them moving forward? And I think what we end up doing for them is providing rules and guardrails to accelerate their development and not lead them out in the dust. So the cool thing about this will continue. You can create and share these rules. You can create assistants. You can reuse models across teams. You can create a team account, and it gives you an opportunity to have a sort of a full experience to sort of meet everyone at the same level. So I wasn't planning on sharing slides. I don't know why people are taking pictures of it, but should I smile? But yeah, let's take a look at where we're at. Cool thing about continue is you got to hit a continue button if you don't auto accept those changes. But one thing I'm going to just point out is I do have the game of life written in code. It's going to be clean Ruby. I didn't run the last one because I tested this all day, and it always fails the first time because I didn't have enough rules to write good Ruby code. And when I use like a local, smaller parameter model, it always fails because, I don't know, anybody training models on Ruby code? That's what I thought. So It's going to run the game of life. It's going to run it cool. It's going to run it in the prompt too. So you kind of saw it for a second. I could run it again down here if I needed to. But the other thing I wanted to point out is I could also say, based on my rules, please implement test in a game.test.rb. So we'll see if that happens, and then I will look around if anybody has any questions. Nope. Oh, question right here? Okay, so the first model was run locally. I did cheat a little bit, and this one's actually hosted on Continue. So I'll open up my, it's actually running. I think I have a config. Sorry, I don't want to break the agent, but I'll show you once the agent's complete. But essentially, I have a token, an Anthropic token that's pointed that I've hosted on a server, and it's running that. So obviously, you can't run Claude local on your machine. It's one, it's too big, but also it's not accessible. It's, well, they don't let you. Any other questions? Oh, there we go. We got some test. And I can assure you these are pretty good tests as well. Let's see if it gets me a description and I can run this. Cool, yep. So it's going to run all the tests. I've got, 4 failures. And that's TDD for you. So test-driven development, you get failures and you go and fix them. Funny enough, I was actually expecting the test to be written first, so I've got to go slap the agent and tell it to write tests in all caps. But when I was testing this earlier, it actually was writing the test first. But I did want to go ahead and show Ruby game.rb, and you can kind of see the pattern. That's interesting. It didn't print. Anyway, I didn't have a lot of rules on how to write the game of life, but it earlier today was actually writing it much better. And I think I'm gonna. How much time do I have? Can I just regenerate this entire project again? I have a few minutes. All right, let's do it. Oh, man. Let's see an agent go this fast. I'm just kidding. It's like the git commands. You know what? I think what I'll do is I'll help it cheat a little bit, and I'll give it the files so we can skip some steps. And I remember what the prompt I did, which is implement the spec in game. Make it visually interesting. So that was the keyword I was doing earlier today, and I forgot to do that. So hopefully it'll generate a visually interesting one instead of just like screenshots. But I was writing some code for my last job, and I was writing a bunch of Ruby code. And I haven't written Ruby code like professionally since probably 2016. I sort of like dabbled while at GitHub doing a bunch of side things and poking at the Rails monolith. But in reality, I just wasn't caught up to speed on what changed in Ruby and like how to write Ruby code today. So the cool thing about this is I was able to catch up pretty quickly by just taking the PDF of my clean Ruby book and saying generate rules. And I was using Perplexity for that. Like you could do that in a ChatGPT or whatnot. So what I'm toying at the idea, and I know there's like certain repos where folks share rules across like directories, is potentially have a community of folks sharing rules specifically for their community and eventually teams. So if anybody wants to talk about that, I'd love to chat about that later. Cool. We got implementation. It's got a lot of gobbledygook. Let's go ahead and run that. Oh, it didn't print. Add a print to the bottom of the file. I think that would be obvious. All right, last one, and then I will give it up to the next speaker. Now it's getting slower. All right, I guess it's going to have to be trust me, bro, on this one. I swear it worked this morning. All right, thanks so much. I'm B Dougie, and oh, sorry, what was the question? Did I save the file? Oh, I'm the junior. Okay, that's the junior right there. It did exactly what I said. Print. That's amazing. It's got jokes. All right, well, thanks so much. It's just going to keep generating.